Welcome, keeper of Gotham's secrets, to a journey through the shadows of Wayne Manor, where beneath the cowl of night, legends are born, not through tragedy, but through choice, not through vengeance, but through hope. Tonight, we shall explore the chronicles of Timothy Jackson Drake, the boy who became Robin, not because he lost everything, but because he understood that Batman needed him. Let the gentle rhythm of cape and cowl carry you into peaceful slumber as we trace the extraordinary path of the detective who chose heroism, the strategist who mastered hope, the third Robin who proved that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from what we've lost, but from what we choose to protect. In the quiet suburbs of Gotham City, where manicured lawns stretched beneath the shadow of Wayne Tower, and children played games that had nothing to do with the darkness that prowled the city's heart after midnight, there lived a boy whose mind worked in patterns that other children could not understand or follow. Timothy Jackson Drake was born into privilege and comfort, yet, from his earliest years, he displayed a restless intelligence that found the ordinary world insufficient to contain his curiosity and need for intellectual stimulation. The Drake family occupied a position of respectability within Gotham's social hierarchy, their wealth derived from legitimate business enterprises that had flourished during the city's periods of growth and prosperity. Jack and Janet Drake were loving parents in their own way, yet their careers and social obligations often took them far from home, leaving young Tim in the care of household staff who recognized his exceptional abilities but lacked the expertise necessary to nurture and challenge a mind that operated several years ahead of his chronological age. From the age of 6, Tim demonstrated an intuitive understanding of logical systems and cause and effect relationships that astounded the private tutors hired to supplement his formal education. While other children his age struggled with basic arithmetic and simple reading comprehension, Tim was absorbing complex mathematical concepts and devouring books written for high school students. His memory was not merely exceptional, but practically eidetic, allowing him to recall conversations, images, and written material with perfect clarity months or even years after initial exposure. Yet perhaps the most remarkable aspect of young Tim's developing intellect was his capacity for deductive reasoning and pattern recognition that bordered on the supernatural in its accuracy and scope. He could observe the smallest details of human behavior and extrapolate from them comprehensive understanding of personality, motivation, and likely future actions. This ability made him an uncomfortable presence for adults who were unprepared for a child who could see through their carefully constructed facades and polite deceptions with ease that was both admirable and disturbing. The loneliness that characterized Tim's early childhood was not the result of social rejection or peer cruelty, but rather the natural consequence of intellectual isolation that comes from being fundamentally different from those around him. His classmates at Gotham's most prestigious private schools found his interests incomprehensible and his knowledge intimidating, while the adults in his life often treated him as a curiosity rather than a person deserving of genuine friendship and emotional connection. This isolation drove Tim to seek stimulation and companionship in unconventional places, leading him to develop obsessions with subjects that captured his imagination and provided outlets for his analytical capabilities. True crime stories, historical mysteries, and logical puzzles became his primary entertainment. Yet none of these interests could compare to the fascination that would soon consume his entire existence and shape the trajectory of his future in ways that no one could have predicted. The night that changed everything began as a family outing designed to provide Tim with cultural enrichment and exposure to the performing arts that his parents believed were essential components of a well-rounded education. Haley's Circus had come to Gotham as part of its annual tour, bringing with it acts and performers that promised to delight audiences with displays of skill and daring that pushed the boundaries of human capability. 9-year-old Tim Drake sat between his parents in the packed circus tent, his sharp eyes taking in every detail of the spectacle unfolding before him. The colors, sounds, and energy of the performance created a sensory experience unlike anything he had encountered in his ordered and predictable daily routine. Yet his analytical mind continued to operate even in this environment of wonder and excitement, cataloging and processing information with the same methodical precision that characterized all his mental activities. The Flying Graysons were the evening's featured attraction, a family of acrobats whose death-defying aerial performances had earned them recognition as the finest circus performers of their generation. Dick Grayson, the youngest member of the troupe, displayed abilities that seemed to transcend normal human limitations, executing moves that required perfect timing, flawless technique, and absolute fearlessness. Tim watched with growing fascination as the young acrobat performed feats that his analytical mind recognized as requiring years of training and natural talent that was genuinely rare. The tragedy that followed was swift and terrible, yet Tim's exceptional memory would preserve every detail with crystalline clarity that would haunt and inspire him for years to come. The sabotaged trapeze equipment failed at precisely the moment when John and Mary Grayson were at the peak of their most difficult routine, sending them plummeting to the circus floor while their son watched in horror from the platform above. The screams of the audience, the sickening impact, the stunned silence that followed, all became permanently etched in Tim's consciousness, with the kind of perfect recall that would allow him to analyze and reanalyze the event countless times in the future. But it was not the tragedy itself that would prove most significant in shaping Tim's destiny, but rather his observation of the figures who emerged from the crowd to take charge of the situation. With professional competence and obvious authority, Batman appeared as if materializing from shadow itself, his presence immediately transforming the chaotic scene into something organized and purposeful. Beside him stood a smaller figure whose colorful costume and youthful energy identified him as the legendary Robin, the boy wonder, whose exploits had already become the stuff of legend throughout Gotham City. Tim watched with intense focus as these two heroes worked together with seamless coordination that spoke of years of partnership and mutual trust. Batman's investigation of the sabotaged equipment was methodical and thorough, while Robin provided comfort and support to the traumatized performers and staff. The young acrobat who had just lost his parents was gently guided away from the scene, his grief temporarily held in check by the promise of justice and the presence of protectors who understood his pain. In those crucial moments, as he observed the dynamic duo in action for the first time, Tim Drake experienced an intellectual awakening that would define the remainder of his existence. Here were real heroes, not the fictional characters from comic books and movies, but actual human beings who had dedicated their lives to protecting others and fighting injustice. The precision of their methods, the efficiency of their coordination, the obvious depth of their knowledge and training all appealed to Tim's analytical mind in ways that no other subject had ever achieved. The newspapers and television coverage that followed the circus tragedy provided Tim with his first comprehensive introduction to Batman and Robin's ongoing war against crime in Gotham City. He absorbed every piece of information with the same intensity that he had once reserved for academic subjects, building detailed mental files about their methods, their equipment, their allies and enemies, and the patterns that governed their activities. What began as intellectual curiosity gradually evolved into something approaching obsession as Tim discovered that the world of costumed heroes contained mysteries and complexities that could occupy his superior intellect indefinitely. The young orphan who had been taken away that night at the circus also became a subject of fascination for Tim, though he did not initially understand the connection between Dick Grayson and the colorful figure who fought beside Batman. The media coverage of the boy's adoption by billionaire Bruce Wayne provided Tim with additional pieces of a puzzle that his mind was already beginning to assemble, though the final solution would require years of patient observation and deductive analysis. Tim's parents, concerned about their son's growing preoccupation with what they viewed as sensationalized crime stories and unhealthy fascination with violence, attempted to redirect his interests toward more conventional pursuits appropriate for a child of his social position. They enrolled him in additional academic programs, arranged for private lessons in music and art, and encouraged participation in organized sports and social activities with children from similar backgrounds. Yet none of these well-intentioned interventions could diminish Tim's burning need to understand the mysteries that Batman and Robin represented. The sophisticated surveillance equipment that Tim began assembling in his bedroom was initially dismissed by household staff as an elaborate game, or perhaps preparation for a future career in electronics or engineering. His parents, when they were present to notice his activities, assumed that his interest in cameras, recording devices, and computer systems represented a natural extension of his technological aptitude and encouraged what they viewed as constructive hobby development. What they did not realize was that their 9-year-old son was conducting the most comprehensive independent study of Batman and Robin's activities that had ever been attempted by a civilian observer. Tim's systematic documentation included detailed analysis of their patrol patterns, response times, tactical preferences, and operational procedures that would have been valuable to law enforcement agencies if they had possessed the expertise necessary to interpret his findings. The revelation that would unlock the central mystery of the dynamic duo's secret identities came not through dramatic confrontation or accidental discovery, but through the kind of patient observation and logical deduction that characterized all of Tim's intellectual achievements. During a televised broadcast of Batman and Robin's battle against the Penguin, Tim noticed that Robin executed a quadruple somersault that was identical in every detail to the signature move that Dick Grayson had performed during that fatal night at Haley's Circus. The mathematical precision required for such an acrobatic feat, combined with the extreme rarity of individuals capable of performing it successfully, made the connection undeniable to Tim's analytical mind. The probability that two different people could execute exactly the same complex aerial maneuver with identical form and timing was so infinitesimally small that it could be safely dismissed as impossible. Dick Grayson and Robin were the same person, which meant that Bruce Wayne, his adoptive father, must be Batman. This breakthrough in understanding opened floodgates of comprehension that allowed Tim to reinterpret years of accumulated observations and media coverage through the lens of his newfound knowledge. Bruce Wayne's suspicious injuries, his unexplained absences, his Foundation's charitable work in areas affected by Batman's activities, all suddenly made perfect sense when viewed as elements of an elaborate double life designed to protect the secret identity of Gotham's greatest protector. The validation of his deductive reasoning filled Tim with satisfaction that transcended any academic achievement or intellectual success he had previously experienced. Here was proof that his exceptional abilities could be applied to real-world mysteries of genuine significance, that his mind was capable of solving puzzles that had eluded investigators and journalists with far more resources and professional training than he possessed. Yet the knowledge also brought with it a sense of responsibility that Tim was too young to fully understand but too mature to ignore. He had uncovered secrets that could endanger the lives of the men who had dedicated themselves to protecting others. Information that in the wrong hands could destroy everything that Batman and Robin had worked to build. The weight of this knowledge would shape every decision he made for years to come, driving him toward a destiny that he could not yet imagine but was already beginning to embrace. As Tim continued his surveillance and analysis of Batman and Robin's activities, he began to notice subtle changes in their partnership that spoke to evolving dynamics and growing independence on Robin's part. Dick Grayson was maturing from sidekick to partner, developing his own style and preferences that sometimes conflicted with Batman's more methodical approach. The boy who had once followed Batman's lead without question was beginning to assert his own judgment and tactical preferences, creating tension that Tim could observe even from his distant vantage point. The transition that eventually saw Dick Grayson leave Gotham to establish himself as Nightwing in the nearby city of Bloodhaven was documented by Tim with the same meticulous care that he had applied to all aspects of the dynamic duo's career. He understood intellectually that partnerships evolve and that protégés must eventually forge their own paths. Yet emotionally, he felt the loss of something precious and irreplaceable when the original Robin left Batman's side. The arrival of Jason Todd as the second Robin provided Tim with new subjects for study and analysis. Yet he quickly recognized that this partnership operated according to different principles than the one that had preceded it. Where Dick Grayson had brought acrobatic grace and intuitive understanding of Batman's methods, Jason Todd contributed street wisdom and aggressive instincts that sometimes put him at odds with his mentor's more measured approach to crime fighting. Tim's growing expertise in Batman and Robin's operational methods allowed him to predict potential problems with the new partnership that proved tragically prescient when news of Robin's death in an explosion overseas shocked the superhero community and devastated Batman himself. The loss of his second protégé had profound effects on Batman's behavior that were immediately apparent to someone who had spent years studying his patterns and psychological profile. The increasingly violent and reckless behavior that Batman displayed in the months following Jason Todd's death alarmed Tim in ways that transcended his role as distant observer and transformed him into someone who felt genuine concern for the well-being of the man behind the mask. Batman's solo activities became more dangerous and less carefully planned. His treatment of criminals grew harsher and more brutal, and his coordination with other heroes deteriorated as grief and guilt consumed his judgment and emotional stability. Tim's analytical mind recognized that Batman was spiraling toward a psychological breakdown that could result in his death or transformation into something that contradicted everything he had originally stood for. The man who had once been Gotham's greatest protector was becoming a liability to the very people he sought to defend, driven by pain and loss that threatened to corrupt his mission beyond recognition or redemption. It was during this period of crisis that Tim Drake made the decision that would transform him from observer to participant, from student to partner, from curious child to hero in training. Batman needed Robin not merely as an assistant or sidekick, but as a psychological anchor that could remind him of his original purpose and prevent him from losing himself entirely to the darkness that had claimed so many others who walked the path of vigilante justice. The boy who had spent years watching from the shadows was about to step into the light and offer himself as the solution to Batman's greatest problem, not because he sought adventure or recognition, but because his superior intellect had identified a need that only he was positioned to fill. Tim Drake was ready to become the third Robin, though he did not yet understand the full implications of the choice he was preparing to make, or the destiny that awaited him in the cave beneath Wayne Manor. The death of Jason Todd sent shockwaves through Gotham's underground that reverberated far beyond the immediate circle of heroes and villains who had witnessed the second Robin's tragic end in a warehouse explosion that claimed not only a young life, but also shattered something fundamental within the Dark Knight's psyche. The boy who had brought street-smart aggression and fierce loyalty to the Robin mantle was gone, his life cut short by the same kind of violence that Batman had sworn to prevent, creating a wound in Bruce Wayne's soul that would prove far more difficult to heal than any physical injury he had ever sustained. From his distant vantage point as the most dedicated civilian observer of Batman's activities, Tim Drake recognized immediately that something profound and dangerous had shifted in the dynamic duo's absence. The Batman who emerged from the tragedy was not the same methodical protector who had once worked in seamless partnership with his colorful sidekick, but rather a darker and more brutal figure whose actions seemed driven by barely controlled rage rather than the careful strategy that had previously characterized his war on crime. The changes in Batman's behavior were subtle at first, noticeable primarily to someone who possessed Tim's encyclopedic knowledge of the hero's operational patterns and psychological profile. Patrol routes that had once been carefully planned to maximize efficiency and minimize civilian exposure to danger became erratic and unpredictable, following patterns that seemed designed more for hunting specific types of criminals than protecting innocent bystanders from harm. The precision timing that had once allowed Batman to intervene in criminal activities at the optimal moment gave way to rushed confrontations that often resulted in more violence and property damage than necessary. Most disturbing of all was the escalation in Batman's treatment of the criminals he encountered during his nightly activities. Where once he had employed the minimum force necessary to subdue opponents and gather information, he now seemed to relish the opportunity to inflict pain and terror that went far beyond what was required for effective law enforcement. Interrogation techniques that had previously been psychological rather than physical became increasingly brutal, while his willingness to leave criminals in conditions that required immediate medical attention suggested a callous disregard for human life that contradicted everything he had once represented. Tim's analytical mind recognized these behavioral changes as symptoms of unprocessed grief and guilt that were consuming Batman from within, transforming him from protector into predator through the same psychological mechanisms that had corrupted other vigilantes throughout history. The man who had once served as a beacon of hope for Gotham's citizens was evolving into something that might ultimately pose as great a threat to public safety as the criminals he pursued with such single-minded determination. The realization that Batman was spiraling toward a complete psychological breakdown filled Tim with a sense of urgency and responsibility that transcended his role as passive observer and forced him to confront the possibility that intervention might be necessary to prevent an irreversible transformation. His superior intellect allowed him to extrapolate from current trends to predict a future in which Batman's mission would be completely corrupted. His methods would become indistinguishable from those of the villains he fought, and Gotham would lose its greatest protector to the very darkness he had once held at bay. The solution that Tim's analytical mind identified was both obvious and seemingly impossible to implement. Batman needed Robin, not merely as an assistant or partner, but as a psychological anchor that could remind him of his original purpose and prevent him from losing himself entirely to grief and rage. The presence of a young partner had served multiple functions beyond simple tactical support, providing Batman with someone who represented innocence worth protecting, hope worth fighting for, and humanity worth preserving, even in the face of overwhelming evidence of evil and corruption. Yet the obvious candidate for filling this crucial role had already moved beyond the need for such a partnership, establishing himself as Nightwing in the nearby city of Bloodhaven, where he could pursue his own approach to crime fighting without the constraints that came from working under Batman's shadow. Dick Grayson had matured from sidekick to independent hero, developing his own methods and building relationships that reflected his evolved understanding of what it meant to protect innocent life while maintaining the moral principles that separated heroes from vigilantes. Tim understood intellectually why Dick had chosen to forge his own path rather than remaining as Robin indefinitely. Yet, He also recognized that this natural progression had left Batman without the stabilizing influence that had been essential to maintaining his psychological equilibrium and preventing the kind of corruption that now threatened to destroy everything he had built. The partnership between Batman and Robin had been more than a crime-fighting arrangement. It had been a symbiotic relationship that benefited both participants by providing structure, purpose, and emotional connection that neither could achieve alone. The decision to seek out Dick Grayson and attempt to convince him to return as Robin was not made lightly or impulsively, but rather represented the culmination of months of careful analysis and growing concern about Batman's deteriorating condition. Tim's research had provided him with sufficient information to locate Nightwing in Bloodhaven. Yet, approaching someone who had no reason to trust a 12-year-old stranger with claims about Batman's psychological state would require careful planning and compelling evidence. The journey from Gotham to Bloodhaven represented Tim's first real venture into the world of active heroics rather than passive observation, though he approached the mission with the same methodical preparation that characterized all his intellectual pursuits. He equipped himself with documentation of Batman's recent activities, compiled video evidence of the behavioral changes he had observed, and prepared logical arguments that would demonstrate the necessity of intervention to someone who might be reluctant to believe that Bruce Wayne was capable of the kind of psychological deterioration that Tim had witnessed. Finding Nightwing proved less difficult than Tim had anticipated, though the meeting did not unfold according to his carefully prepared plans. Dick Grayson possessed instincts and training that made him immediately aware of being observed, leading to a confrontation that caught Tim off guard despite his extensive preparation. The young detective, who had spent years studying heroes from a distance, suddenly found himself face to face with one of his subjects, forced to explain his presence and justify his concerns to someone who had every reason to be suspicious of his motives. The conversation that followed tested Tim's ability to communicate his findings in ways that would be taken seriously by someone whose experience and expertise far exceeded his own. Dick's initial skepticism was understandable given Tim's age and civilian status, yet the depth of knowledge he displayed about Batman's recent activities and the accuracy of his psychological analysis gradually convinced the former Robin that the boy's concerns were legitimate and his observations were reliable. Dick's reluctance to return to the Robin role was rooted in valid concerns about regression and independence that Tim had not fully considered in his analysis of the situation. The transition from sidekick to independent hero had been difficult and necessary for Dick's personal development, requiring him to establish his own identity and prove his capabilities without relying on Batman's reputation or resources. Returning to Robin would represent a backward step that could undermine everything he had worked to achieve as Nightwing. Yet Tim's persistence and logical arguments gradually wore down Dick's resistance, as the evidence of Batman's deterioration became impossible to ignore or dismiss. The boy's obvious intelligence and genuine concern for Bruce Wayne's welfare demonstrated that his motives were altruistic rather than self-serving, while his detailed documentation provided proof that the situation was indeed as serious as he claimed. Most importantly, Tim's willingness to travel alone to Bloodhaven and risk confronting a trained vigilante showed a level of commitment and courage that suggested he might possess the qualities necessary for the role he was proposing. The decision to take Tim to Wayne Manor and the Batcave was not made impulsively, but rather represented Dick's acknowledgement that the situation required immediate assessment and potentially drastic intervention. Alfred Pennyworth's involvement would be essential for any plan that involved convincing Bruce Wayne to accept help, while access to the Batcave would allow for direct observation of Batman's current condition and resources. Tim's first entry into the legendary Batcave was overwhelming in ways that his extensive research and preparation had not adequately predicted. The sheer scale of the operation, the sophistication of the equipment, the comprehensive nature of the files and databases all exceeded his most optimistic estimates of Batman's capabilities and resources. Here was proof that Bruce Wayne had dedicated not merely his time and energy, but his entire fortune and existence to the mission of protecting Gotham City and its citizens from harm. The trophies and mementos that filled the cave told stories of adventures and victories that had become legends within the superhero community. Yet Tim's analytical eye could also detect signs of the deterioration that concerned him so deeply. Equipment that had once been meticulously maintained showed evidence of neglect, while strategic plans and case files reflected the increasingly erratic thinking patterns that had become characteristic of Batman's recent activities. Alfred's presence provided a calming influence that helped Tim overcome his initial awe and focus on the purpose of his visit. The butler's genuine concern for Bruce Wayne's welfare was evident in every word and gesture, while his willingness to listen seriously to Tim's analysis demonstrated that the boy's observations confirmed worries that had been building within Wayne Manor's staff for months. Alfred had witnessed Bruce's previous periods of darkness and isolation, yet the current crisis seemed more severe and potentially permanent than anything that had come before. The conversation between Dick, Alfred, and Tim in the depths of the Batcave laid the foundation for the intervention that would ultimately save Batman from his own worst impulses, while also launching Tim Drake on the path toward becoming the third Robin. Dick's initial plan to resume patrol activities as Nightwing rather than Robin reflected his continued resistance to regression. Yet Tim's insistence that Batman specifically needed Robin, rather than simply another partner, revealed his sophisticated understanding of the psychological dynamics that had made the original partnership so effective. Alfred's suggestion that Tim himself might be the solution they were seeking was presented subtly and diplomatically, yet the implications were clear to everyone present. The boy who had demonstrated such comprehensive understanding of Batman's needs and such unwavering commitment to helping him might possess the qualities necessary to serve as the next Robin, if he could be properly trained and prepared for the dangers inherent in such a role. Tim's response to this possibility revealed the depth of his commitment and the maturity of his thinking despite his youth. He understood that becoming Robin would mean abandoning the safety and comfort of his privileged civilian existence in favor of a life of constant danger and responsibility. Yet his analysis had convinced him that Batman's need was genuine and urgent, while his own capabilities and knowledge made him uniquely qualified to fill the role that circumstances had created. The Robin costume that Alfred retrieved from its display case represented more than mere clothing. It was a symbol of hope, partnership, and the belief that even the darkest nights could be redeemed through the presence of light. The weight of history and expectation that came with donning those colors was not lost on Tim, yet he accepted the responsibility with the same analytical calm that characterized all his major decisions. The mission against Two-Face, that served as Tim's unofficial audition for the Robin role, was more dangerous and complex than anyone had anticipated. Yet it provided the perfect opportunity for him to demonstrate that his theoretical knowledge could be translated into practical heroics when circumstances demanded action rather than analysis. His performance during the crisis showed that he possessed not only the intellectual capabilities necessary for detective work, but also the physical skills, tactical thinking, and moral courage required for active crime fighting. Batman's initial reaction to Tim's appearance in costume was predictably negative, reflecting both his protective instincts toward young people and his reluctance to risk another tragic loss like the one that had claimed Jason Todd. Yet even in his emotionally compromised state, Bruce Wayne could recognize the exceptional qualities that Tim displayed and the potential benefits that might come from accepting him as a new partner. The partnership that emerged from this crisis was different from either of its predecessors, shaped by Tim's unique background and analytical approach to crime fighting. Where Dick Grayson had brought acrobatic grace and Jason Todd had contributed street wisdom, Tim offered strategic thinking and deductive reasoning that complemented Batman's own detective skills while providing fresh perspectives on old problems. The acceptance of Tim as Robin was gradual and conditional, requiring him to prove himself through extensive training and careful mentoring that would prepare him for the dangers he would face, while also ensuring that he understood the moral principles that separated heroes from vigilantes. Bruce Wayne's insistence on comprehensive preparation reflected both his desire to protect his new partner and his determination to avoid repeating the mistakes that had contributed to Jason Todd's death. The transformation of Tim Drake from obsessed observer to active participant in Batman's mission represented more than simple career change. It was the fulfillment of a destiny that had been building since that night at Haley's Circus, when a 9-year-old boy had first witnessed the power of heroism and begun the intellectual journey that would eventually lead him to dedicate his life to serving others. The third Robin had found his calling not through tragedy or accident, but through careful analysis, logical decision-making, and the conscious choice to use his exceptional gifts in service of something greater than himself. Bruce Wayne's acceptance of Tim Drake as the third Robin did not come easily or without profound reservations that reflected both his protective instincts and the psychological scars left by Jason Todd's tragic death. The man who had once embraced young partners as essential components of his mission now found himself haunted by memories of failure and loss that made the prospect of training another child seem not merely risky, but potentially criminal in its disregard for innocent life. The conditions that Bruce established for Tim's transformation from civilian observer to active crime fighter were more stringent and comprehensive than anything that had been required of his predecessors, reflecting lessons learned through bitter experience about the inadequacy of good intentions and natural talent when confronted with the lethal realities of Gotham's criminal underworld. Where Dick Grayson had been trained through practical application and Jason Todd had been accepted based on street experience, Tim would be subjected to a systematic program of preparation that left nothing to chance or assumption. The physical conditioning that formed the foundation of Tim's training regimen was designed not merely to build strength and endurance, but to develop the kind of comprehensive fitness that would allow him to survive encounters with opponents whose capabilities far exceeded those of ordinary criminals. Bruce had learned from studying the deaths of other young heroes that good intentions and basic martial arts training were insufficient protection against enemies who possessed superhuman abilities, advanced weapons, or simply the ruthless determination to kill anyone who opposed their activities. Tim's natural athleticism provided a solid foundation for this intensive conditioning. Yet his privileged background had not prepared him for the kind of physical demands that would be placed upon him as Robin. The boy who had spent most of his life in air-conditioned classrooms and comfortable bedrooms suddenly found himself subjected to training routines that pushed his body to its absolute limits, while also developing the pain tolerance and mental toughness necessary for sustained combat operations. The martial arts instruction that accompanied his physical conditioning drew upon Bruce's extensive knowledge of fighting styles from around the world, yet it was adapted specifically for Tim's physical characteristics and psychological profile. Where Dick's training had emphasized acrobatic techniques that complemented his circus background, and Jason's had focused on street fighting methods that matched his aggressive instincts, Tim's instruction concentrated on strategic applications of force that maximized efficiency while minimizing risk to himself and others. The intellectual challenges that Bruce incorporated into Tim's training were perhaps even more demanding than the physical requirements. designed to test and develop the analytical capabilities that had originally brought the boy to Batman's attention. Crime-solving exercises, tactical planning scenarios, and psychological profiling assignments pushed Tim to apply his natural intelligence in ways that would be directly relevant to his future role as a detective and crime fighter. The ethical framework that underlay all aspects of Tim's training represented Bruce's most important contribution to the boy's development, reflecting hard-won wisdom about the moral principles that separated heroes from vigilantes and protectors from predators. The temptations and pressures that came with great power had corrupted countless individuals throughout history, while the specific challenges of fighting crime, while maintaining moral authority, required constant vigilance against the psychological forces that could transform noble intentions into destructive obsessions. Tim's response to this intensive training program revealed qualities that even Bruce had not fully anticipated despite his careful evaluation of the boy's potential. The discipline and dedication that Tim displayed exceeded anything that his comfortable upbringing should have produced, while his ability to absorb and integrate complex information across multiple domains demonstrated intellectual flexibility that would serve him well in the chaotic environment of active crime fighting. The relationship that developed between mentor and student during this extended training period was different from either of Bruce's previous partnerships with young protégés, shaped by Tim's unique background and the changed circumstances that had brought them together. Where his relationships with Dick and Jason had evolved organically through shared experiences and mutual need, his connection with Tim was built upon careful analysis and conscious choice on both sides. Bruce's recognition of Tim's exceptional analytical abilities led to increasingly sophisticated assignments that tested not only his detective skills, but also his capacity for independent thinking and creative problem-solving. Case studies drawn from Batman's extensive files provided Tim with opportunities to examine real-world applications of the theoretical knowledge he was acquiring, while hypothetical scenarios forced him to consider ethical dilemmas that had no clear or simple solutions. The psychological preparation that accompanied Tim's tactical training was designed to help him understand and cope with the mental stresses that came with regular exposure to violence, tragedy, and moral ambiguity. Bruce's own struggles with these challenges had taught him that intellectual preparation alone was insufficient protection against the corrosive effects of constant confrontation with human evil and suffering. Tim's civilian identity presented unique challenges that had not existed for his predecessors, both of whom had entered the Robin role after experiencing personal tragedies that severed their connections to normal life. Tim's parents were still alive, and his social obligations still intact, requiring careful management to maintain his cover story, while also ensuring that his heroic activities did not endanger those he cared about. The development of advanced technical skills formed another crucial component of Tim's preparation, reflecting both his natural aptitude for technology and the increasingly sophisticated nature of modern criminal enterprises. Computer programming, electronics, surveillance technique, and communication systems all required mastery if he was to function effectively as Batman's partner in an environment where information was often more valuable than physical strength. Alfred Pennyworth's involvement in Tim's training provided elements of stability and emotional support that balanced Bruce's more demanding and sometimes harsh instructional methods. The butler's decades of experience with the Wayne family had taught him how to nurture young people, while also preparing them for the extraordinary responsibilities they would be expected to shoulder as members of Gotham's most important heroic dynasty. The weapons training that Tim received was carefully calibrated to provide him with defensive capabilities, while also reinforcing the moral principles that governed the use of force in service of justice. Bruce's refusal to employ lethal weapons was not merely a personal preference, but a fundamental aspect of his heroic identity, and Tim would be expected to uphold the same standards regardless of the provocation or danger he might face. The costume that was eventually created for Tim as the third Robin represented both continuity with the past and adaptation to changed circumstances, incorporating design elements that honored the legacy of his predecessors, while also reflecting his unique characteristics and capabilities. The colors remained the same, preserving the psychological impact that the Robin identity had on both allies and enemies, yet the cut and functionality were modified to accommodate Tim's preferred fighting style and tactical preferences. The symbolism embedded within the Robin costume carried significance that extended far beyond mere identification or intimidation, representing ideals of hope, renewal, and the triumph of light over darkness that had inspired heroes and civilians alike since the partnership between Batman and Robin had first been established. Tim's acceptance of these symbols meant taking responsibility not only for his own actions, but also for maintaining the reputation and moral authority that came with wearing one of the most recognizable costumes in the superhero community. The gradual integration of Tim into Batman's operational routine required careful planning and constant adjustment, as both partners learned to accommodate each other's working styles and personality characteristics. The partnership that had once seemed natural and effortless with Dick Grayson, and challenging but manageable with Jason Todd, required conscious effort and mutual compromise to function effectively, with Tim's more analytical and methodical approach to crime fighting. The first joint missions that Batman and the new Robin undertook together were carefully selected to provide Tim with practical experience while minimizing the risks that came from throwing an untested partner into situations that could prove fatal to someone lacking sufficient experience and judgment. These initial forays into active crime fighting served as final examinations of Tim's preparation, while also allowing both partners to evaluate the effectiveness of their collaboration. Tim's performance during these early missions exceeded Bruce's expectations in some areas, while revealing deficiencies that required additional training and attention in others. His strategic thinking and information analysis were exceptional, often providing insights that even Batman had missed, yet his physical skills and combat instincts still needed development before he could be considered fully prepared for independent operations. The feedback and criticism that Bruce provided following each mission were designed not to discourage Tim but to identify specific areas where improvement was necessary and to reinforce the standards of excellence that would be required for long-term survival in their dangerous profession. The balance between encouragement and honest assessment was delicate, requiring sensitivity to Tim's psychological needs, while also maintaining the rigorous standards that could mean the difference between life and death. The respect that Tim gradually earned from other members of the extended Batman family reflected both his obvious competence and his genuine commitment to the values that defined their shared mission. Alfred's approval was evident in countless small gestures and considerations, while Dick Grayson's acceptance of his successor demonstrated that the original Robin recognized qualities in Tim that validated Bruce's decision to accept him as a partner. The relationship between Tim and the law enforcement community that worked alongside Batman required careful cultivation, as his youth and civilian background made him suspect in the eyes of officers who had learned to trust the original partnership through years of successful collaboration. Commissioner Gordon's eventual acceptance of the new Robin was based not on sentiment but on observed competence and demonstrated reliability during crisis situations. The media attention that accompanied Tim's debut as Robin created additional challenges that had not existed for his predecessors, as the 24-hour news cycle and proliferation of amateur journalism meant that every public appearance was subject to immediate analysis and commentary. The management of Tim's public image required sophisticated understanding of media dynamics and careful coordination between all members of the Wayne household. The academic obligations that Tim continued to maintain, despite his heroic activities, required extraordinary time management and organizational skills. As he struggled to balance the demands of advanced education with the unpredictable schedule that came from fighting crime on a nightly basis. His parents' expectations for his continued excellence in conventional areas could not be abandoned without raising suspicions that might compromise his secret identity. The evolution of Tim's fighting style during his early months, as Robin reflected both his natural preferences and the influence of his training with multiple instructors who brought different perspectives and techniques to his education. Bruce's systematic approach provided the foundation, but contributions from Dick Grayson, Alfred, and even occasional guest instructors helped Tim develop a personal combat philosophy that maximized his strengths while compensating for his limitations. The psychological adjustments that Tim experienced as he transitioned from observer to participant in Gotham's war on crime were more significant than he had anticipated. Despite his extensive preparation and intellectual understanding of what would be required, the difference between analyzing violence from a distance and experiencing it directly proved to be profound, requiring emotional resilience that could only be developed through practice and support from those who had faced similar challenges. The recognition that gradually emerged within the superhero community regarding Tim's exceptional abilities as a detective and strategist established his reputation as more than simply Batman's latest sidekick, but rather as a formidable hero in his own right, whose contributions to successful operations often exceeded what might be expected from someone of his age and experience. This respect was earned through consistent performance under pressure and demonstrated expertise in areas that were crucial to modern crime fighting. The bond that developed between Batman and his third Robin was built upon mutual respect and shared commitment to their mission rather than the familial affection that had characterized previous partnerships, yet it proved to be equally strong and effective in practice. Tim's maturity and analytical nature made him more of a junior partner than a traditional sidekick, while Bruce's recognition of his exceptional capabilities led to increasing trust and independence in operational matters. The legacy of this intensive training period extended far beyond Tim's immediate preparation for active crime fighting, to establish patterns and principles that would guide his development throughout his heroic career. The thoroughness of his preparation and the high standards that were established during these crucial months would serve him well during future challenges that would test not only his abilities but also his character and commitment to the values that defined the Robin tradition. The crisis that would become known as Nightfall began not with dramatic confrontation or obvious threat, but with the methodical precision of a strategist whose patience and planning had been refined through years of imprisonment and bitter contemplation of revenge. Bane's emergence from the hellish confines of Peñaduro represented more than the escape of another dangerous criminal. It was the manifestation of a carefully orchestrated campaign designed to destroy Batman not merely through physical confrontation, but through the systematic dismantling of everything that gave his life meaning and purpose. Tim Drake's role during the opening phases of this crisis tested his abilities and judgment in ways that his extensive training had not fully prepared him to handle, forcing him to confront the reality that theoretical knowledge and controlled exercises were insufficient preparation for the chaos and unpredictability of a coordinated assault on everything he had learned to value and protect. The intelligence that had served him so well in analyzing patterns and solving mysteries now had to be applied to a situation where the enemy understood Batman's methods and psychology well enough to turn his greatest strengths into critical vulnerabilities. The prison break at Arkham Asylum that served as Bane's opening gambit was executed with surgical precision that demonstrated intimate knowledge of the facility's security systems and the psychological profiles of its most dangerous inmates. Rather than simply releasing chaos upon Gotham, the operation was designed to force Batman into a series of increasingly desperate battles that would exhaust his physical and emotional resources, while also isolating him from potential allies who might have provided crucial support during his time of greatest need. Tim's analytical mind recognized immediately that the pattern of escapes and subsequent crimes was too convenient and systematic to be coincidental, yet convincing Batman to modify his response required delicate handling of a mentor whose protective instincts and sense of responsibility made him vulnerable to precisely the kind of manipulation that Bane was employing. The boy who had once observed the Dark Knight's methods from a safe distance now found himself in the position of trying to advise someone whose experience and expertise far exceeded his own. The physical toll that the continuous battles with escaped inmates took on Batman was evident to anyone who knew him well enough to recognize the subtle signs of exhaustion and stress that he normally concealed behind his intimidating facade. Alfred's medical examinations revealed damage that accumulated faster than Bruce Wayne's remarkable constitution could repair, while Tim's behavioral observations documented changes in reaction time and decision-making that suggested impairment serious enough to compromise operational effectiveness. Yet Bruce's stubborn refusal to accept assistance or modify his tactics reflected not merely personal pride, but a deeply ingrained sense of responsibility that made him incapable of stepping back from his mission, even when doing so might serve the greater good. The man who had spent years learning to trust partners and allies found himself reverting to the isolation and self-reliance that had characterized his earliest years as Batman, driven by fear that accepting help might result in additional losses like the one that had claimed Jason Todd. The revelation of Bane's involvement in orchestrating the crisis provided Tim with the crucial insight necessary to understand the true scope of the threat they were facing, yet it also confirmed his worst fears about the inadequacy of conventional responses to such a sophisticated and personal attack. The enemy they confronted was not simply another powerful criminal seeking money or territory, but rather someone whose obsession with Batman matched and perhaps exceeded Bruce's own dedication to his mission. The preparation of contingency plans and backup protocols occupied much of Tim's attention during the escalating phases of the Nightfall crisis, as his strategic thinking and analytical capabilities made him uniquely qualified to anticipate potential failure modes and develop responses that might salvage victory even from seemingly hopeless situations. The planning documents he created during this period would later serve as templates for crisis management procedures that became standard practice within the extended Batman family. The final confrontation between Batman and Bane unfolded with the terrible inevitability of a classical tragedy, as two obsessed individuals met in combat that could have only one possible outcome given the circumstances that had shaped their encounter. Tim's position as observer, rather than participant during this crucial battle, reflected both his physical limitations and Bruce's protective instincts, yet it also provided him with a perspective that would prove crucial for managing the aftermath of what was to come. The sight of Batman's broken body being lifted above Bane's head before being brought down across his knee with sickening force was seared into Tim's memory with the same indelible clarity that had preserved his recollections of the Flying Grayson's deaths years earlier. The sound of vertebrae cracking, Bruce's agonized cry, the way his body crumpled and went limp, all became permanent fixtures in the young Robin's consciousness that would influence every decision he made in the days and months that followed. The immediate medical response that Tim coordinated with Alfred's assistance demonstrated both his ability to function under extreme pressure and his comprehensive understanding of the support systems that maintained Batman's operations even during crisis situations. The ambulance that transported Bruce to the Batcave's medical facility was summoned through carefully maintained civilian identities and contacts that preserved operational security, while ensuring access to the specialized care that conventional hospitals could not provide. Alfred's medical expertise, developed through decades of caring for members of the Wayne family who engaged in activities that regularly resulted in serious injuries, was sufficient to stabilize Bruce's condition and prevent immediate life-threatening complications. Yet the extent of the spinal damage was beyond anything that could be treated in the cave's sophisticated but limited facilities. The decision to maintain Bruce at home rather than transferring him to a fully equipped medical center reflected both security concerns and his own stubborn insistence on maintaining control over his treatment and recovery. The transformation of the Batcave from operational headquarters to intensive care facility required extensive modifications and equipment acquisitions that tested the Wayne family's resources and connections in ways that had never been necessary during previous injuries or setbacks. Tim's role in coordinating these changes demonstrated his growing maturity and capability, while also providing him with comprehensive understanding of the logistical complexities that supported Batman's mission. The psychological impact of witnessing Batman's defeat and apparent permanent incapacitation was more devastating for Tim than the physical challenges of managing the immediate crisis, forcing him to confront the possibility that the partnership he had worked so hard to earn might be ending before he had fully proven himself worthy of the trust and responsibility that had been placed in him. The mentor who had shaped his development from curious observer to capable hero was now dependent upon others for even the most basic needs. Jean-Paul Valley's emergence as Bruce Wayne's chosen successor in the Batman role created complications that Tim's analytical mind had not anticipated. Despite his extensive planning for various contingency scenarios, the former Azrael brought to the position a set of psychological issues and operational preferences that were fundamentally incompatible with the methods and principles that had guided the original Batman's mission for years. The initial partnership between Tim and the substitute Batman was marked by tension and uncertainty as both individuals struggled to establish working relationships that honored their commitments to Bruce, while also acknowledging the changed circumstances that required different approaches to familiar challenges. Jean-Paul's background and training had prepared him for certain aspects of crime fighting while leaving him completely unprepared for others that Tim considered essential components of the Robin-Batman dynamic. The increasing violence and unpredictability that characterized Azrael Batman's methods created moral dilemmas for Tim that tested his loyalty to Bruce Wayne against his responsibility to protect innocent life and maintain the principles that had originally attracted him to the heroic mission. The boy who had become Robin through careful analysis and conscious choice now found himself working alongside someone whose approach to justice seemed to violate everything he had learned to value. The gradual deterioration of Jean-Paul's mental stability and operational judgment provided Tim with daily evidence that the substitute Batman was becoming a threat to the very people he was supposed to protect, yet his youth and civilian status made it difficult for him to challenge someone who had been officially designated as Bruce Wayne's successor and representative. The analytical skills that had once made him valuable as an observer now forced him to document and understand processes that filled him with growing alarm. The decision to withdraw cooperation and support from Azrael Batman represented one of the most difficult choices that Tim had ever made, requiring him to balance his respect for Bruce's judgment against his own assessment of an increasingly dangerous situation. The boy who had spent years learning to follow orders and accept guidance was now forced to make independent decisions that could have profound consequences for everyone he cared about. Bruce Wayne's recovery process was slower and more uncertain than anyone had hoped, complicated by both the severity of his physical injuries and the psychological trauma that came from experiencing defeat so complete and public that it had forced him to acknowledge his own mortality and limitations in ways that his previous encounters with danger had never required. The man who had seemed invulnerable and unstoppable was now struggling with basic mobility and the possibility that his career as Batman might be permanently over. Tim's role as caretaker and emotional support during Bruce's darkest period required maturity and sensitivity that went far beyond anything his training had specifically addressed. Yet his natural empathy and analytical understanding of human psychology provided him with tools that proved surprisingly effective in helping his mentor cope with unprecedented challenges. The conversations they shared during Bruce's convalescence revealed aspects of both their personalities that might otherwise have remained hidden beneath the professional facade of their partnership. The decision to attempt a return to active crime fighting was made not because Bruce had fully recovered from his injuries, but because the situation with Jean-Paul Valley had deteriorated to the point where intervention was necessary regardless of the personal cost involved. Tim's support for this decision reflected both his loyalty to Bruce and his own assessment that Azrael Batman had become a greater threat to Gotham than many of the criminals they were supposed to be fighting. The confrontation between the original Batman and his mentally unstable successor unfolded as a battle not merely between two individuals, but between competing philosophies of justice and approaches to the heroic mission that had sustained both men through their respective periods of suffering and challenge. Tim's role as witness and tactical support provided him with unique insights into the fundamental principles that separated true heroes from those who used heroic methods to serve darker purposes. Bruce's victory over Jean-Paul was achieved not through superior physical strength, which his injuries had compromised, but through psychological understanding and strategic thinking that demonstrated why he had been successful as Batman for so many years before Bane's assault had temporarily incapacitated him. The triumph was as much intellectual as physical, proving that true heroism was based on character and wisdom rather than simply combatability. The unexpected decision to transfer the Batman mantle to Dick Grayson, rather than immediately resuming it himself, reflected Bruce's recognition that his recovery was not yet complete and that the city deserved a protector who could function at full capability rather than someone who was still struggling with the limitations imposed by serious injury. The choice also demonstrated trust in his former partner and acknowledgement that the Batman identity was larger than any individual who might wear the costume. The partnership between Dick Grayson as Batman and Tim Drake as Robin represented the fulfillment of a relationship that had been developing for years beneath the surface of their other obligations and commitments. The original Robin's natural leadership abilities and understanding of Tim's capabilities created a working dynamic that was both familiar and innovative, honoring tradition while also adapting to current realities and needs. The seamless coordination that characterized their joint operations demonstrated that Tim had indeed become worthy of the Robin legacy, as his strategic thinking and analytical skills complemented Dick's more intuitive and acrobatic approach to crime fighting in ways that maximized both their individual strengths and their collective effectiveness. The partnership proved to skeptics that Tim was more than simply Batman's latest protege, but rather a formidable hero whose contributions were essential rather than merely helpful. The period of Dick's tenure as Batman provided Tim with opportunities to develop leadership skills and independent judgment that might not have emerged as quickly under Bruce's more protective and controlling mentorship style. The original Robin's willingness to treat Tim as an equal partner rather than a student created an environment where the younger hero could experiment with different approaches and techniques while still benefiting from experienced guidance. The eventual return of the Batman mantle to Bruce Wayne marked the successful completion of one of the most challenging periods in the Dark Knight's career, while also establishing Tim's reputation as someone who could be trusted with significant responsibility during crisis situations. The boy who had once watched Batman from a distance had proven himself capable of serving not merely as a partner, but as a crucial member of the team that sustained Gotham's protection during its darkest hours. The lessons learned during the Nightfall crisis would influence Tim's approach to heroism for years to come, providing him with understanding of both the possibilities and limitations that shaped the heroic mission, while also demonstrating the importance of maintaining moral principles, even when expedient compromises might seem more practical or effective. The experiences had transformed him from a promising student into a proven hero, whose judgment and capabilities were recognized by everyone who had worked alongside him during the emergency. The recognition that Tim Drake had earned his place as the third Robin opened pathways to independence and responsibility that would have seemed impossible during his earliest days of training and preparation. Yet the transition from protected student to autonomous hero brought with it challenges and opportunities that tested every aspect of his developing character and capabilities. The boy who had once observed Batman's activities from the safety of distant surveillance now found himself at the center of adventures that spanned continents and dimensions, facing threats that required not only physical courage, but also intellectual flexibility and moral judgment that could mean the difference between triumph and catastrophe. The solo missions that began to characterize Tim's heroic career during this period reflected both Bruce Wayne's growing confidence in his abilities and the practical necessities of a world where threats multiplied faster than any single hero could address them adequately. The training that had once seemed excessive and overly cautious now proved its worth as Tim encountered situations that would have been fatal to someone with less comprehensive preparation and more limited understanding of the principles that governed effective crime fighting. The assignment that took Tim to Paris represented his first major solo operation outside the familiar territory of Gotham City, requiring him to adapt his methods and approach to an environment where his usual resources and support systems were unavailable. The criminal organization he was sent to investigate operated according to different rules and cultural expectations than those he had encountered during his partnership with Batman, forcing him to develop new strategies while maintaining the moral principles that defined his heroic identity. The sophistication of the European criminal network that Tim uncovered during his Parisian investigation exceeded anything he had previously encountered, demonstrating that organized crime had evolved far beyond the relatively straightforward territorial disputes and personal vendettas that characterized most of Gotham's criminal enterprises. The international connections and technological capabilities of these adversaries required investigative techniques that pushed Tim's analytical skills to their absolute limits, while also testing his ability to work effectively without immediate backup or support. The success of the Paris mission established Tim's reputation within the international superhero community as someone whose capabilities extended far beyond what might be expected from Batman's junior partner, earning him recognition as a formidable detective and strategist whose contributions to complex operations could be decisive rather than merely supportive. The contacts and relationships he developed during this assignment would prove valuable throughout his subsequent career as he faced increasingly global threats. The return to Gotham that followed Tim's European success was marked by renewed confidence and expanded responsibilities that reflected Bruce's acknowledgement that his protégé had matured beyond the traditional limitations of the Robin role. The partnership that had once been defined by mentorship and protection evolved into something approaching equality as Tim's proven capabilities earned him greater autonomy in operational planning and tactical decision-making. The series of mini-series adventures that documented Tim's growing independence showcased different aspects of his evolving heroic identity, while also exploring the psychological and emotional challenges that came with increased responsibility and exposure to the darker aspects of human nature. Each mission provided opportunities for growth and learning that contributed to his development as both a crime fighter and a person capable of maintaining moral clarity in complex and morally ambiguous situations. The confrontation with the Joker that formed the centerpiece of one such adventure was particularly significant, given the role that Gotham's most dangerous criminal had played in the death of Jason Todd, the previous Robin whose fate served as a constant reminder of the risks that came with the colorful costume and youthful partnership with Batman. Tim's decision to face this enemy despite the obvious dangers demonstrated both his courage and his commitment to proving that tragedy need not be inevitable for those who chose to follow in Jason's footsteps. The psychological preparation that preceded Tim's encounter with the Joker required confronting fears and anxieties that were both rational and deeply personal. As the boy who had become Robin through careful analysis rather than emotional trauma, was forced to consider the possibility that his own death might be the price of his heroic commitments. The support and guidance he received from Bruce and Alfred during this difficult period revealed the depth of the relationships he had built within the Wayne family structure. The actual battle with the Joker tested not only Tim's physical abilities and tactical skills, but also his psychological resilience and capacity for maintaining moral principles when confronted with an enemy whose methods and philosophy represented everything that heroism was meant to oppose. The victory that eventually emerged from this confrontation was achieved not through superior strength or weaponry, but through the application of intelligence and strategic thinking that demonstrated Tim's unique contributions to the Patson's heroic mission. The partnership with Helena Bertinelli as the Huntress during another solo adventure provided Tim with valuable experience in working with heroes whose methods and motivations differed significantly from those he had learned to expect from the Batman family, requiring diplomatic skills and adaptability that expanded his understanding of the diverse approaches that different individuals brought to the shared mission of protecting innocent life. The criminal organization known as the Ghost Dragons that served as the primary antagonist during the Huntress collaboration operated according to principles that combined ancient traditions with modern criminal techniques, creating challenges that required both historical knowledge and contemporary investigative skills to understand and counter effectively. Tim's research into their background and methods demonstrated his growing expertise in areas that extended far beyond simple crime fighting. The successful completion of these solo adventures established patterns and relationships that would influence Tim's development throughout the remainder of his time as Robin, providing him with confidence in his own judgment and capabilities, while also building a network of allies and contacts who recognized his value as both a partner and an independent operator. The boy who had once been dismissed as simply Batman's latest sidekick was now acknowledged as a hero whose contributions were essential rather than merely helpful. The transition to team membership that followed Tim's establishment as a solo hero reflected both his growing maturity and the practical necessities of addressing threats that exceeded the capabilities of individual heroes, regardless of their training or dedication. The invitation to join Young Justice represented recognition from the broader superhero community that Tim had earned his place among the most promising heroes of his generation. The dynamics within Young Justice tested aspects of Tim's personality and leadership capabilities that had not been fully explored during his partnership with Batman, as the team environment required different skills and approaches than those he had developed during his predominantly mentor-student relationships. The other members of the group brought their own unique abilities and perspectives to collective missions, creating opportunities for learning and growth that would have been impossible in isolation. The friendships that Tim developed within Young Justice, particularly his relationship with Connor Kent as Superboy, provided him with emotional connections and support systems that complemented rather than competed with his obligations to the Batman family. The shared experiences of adolescent heroes trying to prove themselves worthy of their mentors and legacies created bonds that would endure throughout their subsequent careers and personal development. The leadership roles that Tim increasingly assumed within team operations reflected both his natural aptitude for strategic thinking and the recognition by his peers that his analytical skills and comprehensive training made him uniquely qualified to coordinate complex missions involving multiple heroes with different specialties and operational preferences. The respect he earned from teammates whose powers often exceeded his own demonstrated that true leadership was based on wisdom and character, rather than simply superior abilities. The transition from Young Justice to membership in the Teen Titans represented another step in Tim's evolution from student to mentor, as the responsibilities of working with younger and less experienced heroes required him to develop teaching and guidance skills that mirrored those he had observed in Batman and other adult heroes. The experience of helping others develop their capabilities provided new perspectives on his own journey from curious observer to proven hero. The tactical innovations that Tim contributed to team operations drew upon his comprehensive understanding of individual and group psychology, allowing him to design strategies that maximized each member's strengths while compensating for their weaknesses and limitations. His ability to analyze complex situations and develop effective responses under pressure earned him recognition as one of the most skilled tacticians among heroes of any age. The romantic relationship that developed between Tim and Stephanie Brown during this period added emotional complexity and personal stakes to his heroic activities, as the young woman who operated as the spoiler brought her own heroic commitments and family complications to their shared experiences. The challenge of maintaining both professional and personal relationships with someone who was also actively involved in crime fighting required maturity and communication skills that extended far beyond anything his previous training had addressed. The civilian identity management that became increasingly complex as Tim's heroic activities expanded required sophisticated planning and time management skills that tested his ability to maintain the various roles and responsibilities that defined his life. The academic excellence that his parents expected, the social obligations that came with his family's position in Gotham society, and the unpredictable demands of crime fighting all competed for time and attention in ways that would have overwhelmed someone with less exceptional organizational capabilities. The technological innovations that Tim developed during this period reflected his growing expertise in areas that complemented his detective skills, while also addressing practical needs that arose during increasingly sophisticated criminal investigations. His contributions to the design and implementation of advanced surveillance systems, communication networks, and analytical tools enhanced the effectiveness of both solo and team operations, while establishing his reputation as someone whose technical knowledge rivaled that of adult heroes with years more experience. The international missions that occasionally took Tim away from Gotham and his team obligations provided opportunities to develop cultural awareness and diplomatic skills that would serve him well throughout his career as he encountered threats and allies from diverse backgrounds and value systems. The ability to adapt his methods and communication style to different cultural contexts became an increasingly valuable asset as criminal organizations adopted global operational strategies. The mentorship opportunities that began to emerge as Tim gained experience and recognition allowed him to give back to the heroic community, while also deepening his own understanding of the principles and methods that had shaped his peak development. The younger heroes who sought his guidance and training provided him with fresh perspectives on familiar challenges, while also confirming his growth from student to teacher. The academic achievements that Tim continued to maintain, despite his increasingly demanding heroic schedule, demonstrated his commitment to developing all aspects of his potential, rather than allowing his exceptional circumstances to limit his intellectual growth or future opportunities. The balance between heroic obligations and educational advancement required sacrifices and compromises that tested his ability to prioritize competing demands while maintaining excellence in all areas of his life. The recognition within the extended Batman family that Tim had indeed become worthy of the Robin legacy was perhaps most significantly demonstrated through Dick Grayson's acknowledgement that the third Robin had surpassed even his own achievements in the role. The original Boy Wonder's assessment that Tim was not only a better Robin, but would likely become a better Batman, represented validation from someone whose opinion carried unique weight and authority based on personal experience and intimate knowledge of what the position required. Bruce Wayne's own recognition of Tim's potential, expressed through both private conversations and public acknowledgements, confirmed that the boy who had once sought to help Batman through his darkest period had succeeded beyond anyone's initial expectations. The prediction that Tim would someday become the world's greatest detective represented not merely personal praise but professional assessment based on observed capabilities and demonstrated achievements that exceeded established standards for heroic excellence. The legacy of Tim's solo flights and team bonds during this crucial period of his development established foundations that would support him throughout the challenges and tragedies that lay ahead, providing him with skills, relationships, and inner resources that would prove essential when his world was shattered by losses that tested his commitment to heroism and his faith in the possibility of meaningful victory over the forces of darkness and despair that threatened everything he had learned to value and protect. The convergence of tragedies that would forever alter the trajectory of Tim Drake's life began not with dramatic confrontation or cosmic catastrophe, but with the slow accumulation of losses that tested his psychological resilience and forced him to confront the terrible truth that heroism, no matter how skillfully practiced or nobly motivated, could not protect those he loved from the random cruelties and calculated malevolence that shaped the world beyond his control. The boy who had chosen to become Robin through careful analysis rather than personal trauma was about to discover that tragedy was not a prerequisite for heroism, yet neither was it something that heroism could indefinitely forestall. The first devastating blow came through the machinations of the mysterious organization known as the Society, whose carefully orchestrated campaign against the superhero community targeted not only active heroes, but also their families, friends, and loved ones in a systematic attempt to demonstrate that no one who opposed their agenda could ever be truly safe from retaliation. The scope and sophistication of their planning exceeded anything that individual heroes or even coordinated teams had previously encountered, representing a new level of threat that required responses for which existing protocols and procedures were completely inadequate. Jack Drake's involvement in his son's heroic activities had been minimal and largely unconscious, yet his connection to Tim made him a target for enemies who understood that the most effective way to hurt a hero was not through direct confrontation, but through the calculated destruction of everything that gave his life meaning and boded purpose. The businessman who had provided his son with a stable and loving home despite his frequent absences was about to pay the ultimate price for the choices that Tim had made in service of protecting others. The package that arrived at the Drake residence appeared innocuous enough to pass through normal security screening, yet it contained both the means of Jack Drake's destruction and the psychological weapon designed to maximize the trauma inflicted upon his son. Captain Boomerang's delivery of death through postal service represented not merely murder, but a calculated assault on Tim's sense of security and his faith in the possibility of maintaining separate civilian and heroic identities that could coexist without mutual contamination. The telephone call that alerted Tim to the attack on his family home came too late to prevent tragedy, but early enough to force him to witness the aftermath of violence that had been specifically designed to cause him maximum psychological damage. The sight of his father's broken body, surrounded by the debris of what had once been a peaceful domestic environment, was burned into his memory with the same indelible clarity that had preserved his recollections of other traumatic events that had shaped his development. The investigation that followed Jack Drake's murder revealed the extent to which Tim's heroic activities had exposed his loved ones to dangers they could neither understand nor defend against, creating guilt and self-recrimination that threatened to undermine everything he had accomplished during his years of service as Robin. The rational part of his mind understood that he bore no responsibility for the actions of criminals who had chosen violence. Yet the emotional impact of losing his father to enemies who had targeted him specifically because of Tim's heroic identity created psychological wounds that would never fully heal. The funeral arrangements and legal proceedings that accompanied his father's death required Tim to function in civilian contexts, while processing grief that was inextricably connected to his secret identity, creating complications that tested his ability to maintain the careful separation between his public and private lives that had protected both aspects of his existence. The sympathy and support offered by those who knew only his civilian identity felt hollow and inadequate compared to the understanding he received from fellow heroes who comprehended the unique nature of his loss. The decision to continue his activities as Robin, despite the personal cost, demonstrated both Tim's commitment to his heroic mission and his growing understanding that retreat from danger would not protect those he cared about from the danger, random violence and calculated cruelty that characterized the world he had chosen to oppose. The boy who had once believed that careful planning and superior intelligence could prevent all tragedies was learning that some losses were inevitable, regardless of preparation or dedication. The relationship with Stephanie Brown that had provided Tim with emotional support and romantic fulfillment became another casualty of the escalating conflict between heroes and villains, as her own activities, as the spoiler made her a target for enemies who recognized that attacking heroes' loved ones was more effective than direct confrontation. The young woman who had brought joy and companionship to Tim's increasingly isolated existence was about to become another lesson in the price that heroes paid for their commitment to protecting others. The circumstances surrounding Stephanie's apparent death during the gang war that consumed Gotham were particularly cruel because they resulted not from enemy action, but from well-intentioned attempts to prove herself worthy of acceptance within the Batman family structure. Her brief tenure as Robin during Tim's temporary absence from the role had ended in disaster when her efforts to implement a plan designed to end gang violence instead triggered a citywide conflict that claimed hundreds of lives and left much of Gotham's East End in ruins. The torture that Stephanie endured at the hands of Black Mask before her apparent death was designed not merely to extract information but to break her spirit and send a message to other heroes about the consequences of interfering with criminal enterprises that had grown too large and sophisticated for traditional law enforcement methods to address effectively. The recordings of her suffering that were subsequently discovered provided evidence of systematic cruelty that exceeded anything in Tim's previous experience. The guilt that Tim experienced over Stephanie's fate was compounded by his knowledge that their romantic relationship had made her a more attractive target for enemies seeking to hurt him through proxy violence, while his temporary abandonment of the Robin role had created the circumstances that led to her disastrous attempt to prove herself worthy of the position he had vacated. The interconnections between personal choices and tragic consequences created psychological burdens that threatened to overwhelm his emotional stability. The loss of Connor Kent during the cosmic crisis that reshaped reality itself represented yet another devastating blow to Tim's psychological equilibrium, as the young man who had been his closest friend and confidant was killed while attempting to prevent universal destruction through personal sacrifice that exemplified the heroic ideal at its most noble and selfless. The death of Superboy was witnessed by heroes throughout the multiverse, yet none felt the loss more keenly than Tim, who had shared adventures, conversations, and dreams of the future with someone whose friendship had provided stability and meaning during the most challenging periods of his development. The investigation into Connor's death revealed that his sacrifice had indeed prevented catastrophe on a scale that would have claimed billions of lives. Yet this knowledge provided little comfort to those who mourned the loss of someone whose potential had been cut short by the demands of heroism and the terrible arithmetic of cosmic conflict. The boy who had possessed powers that could have reshaped the world had instead chosen to use them in service of protecting others, embodying principles that Tim had learned to value, even as their practical application led to heartbreak and loss. The cumulative impact of these multiple tragedies within such a compressed time frame tested Tim's psychological resilience in ways that his training and preparation had not anticipated, forcing him to confront fundamental questions about the nature of heroism and the sustainability of a mission that seemed to require endless sacrifice without offering proportional rewards or protections for those who dedicated their lives to serving others. The boy, who had once believed that intelligence and preparation could solve any problem, was learning that some challenges exceeded the capabilities of any individual, regardless of their dedication or capabilities. The decision to relocate to Bloodhaven following these devastating losses reflected both practical concerns about security and emotional needs for distance from environments that contained too many painful reminders of what had been lost. The city that had served as Nightwing's territory offered both anonymity and the opportunity to establish new patterns and relationships that were not contaminated by memories of tragedy and failure. The costume modification that accompanied Tim's move to Bloodhaven served multiple symbolic and practical purposes, as the incorporation of red and black elements honoring Superboy's memory provided visible evidence of his commitment to carrying forward the legacy of his fallen friend, while also marking his evolution from student to independent hero whose identity was shaped by personal experience, rather than institutional expectations. The new design reflected both grief and determination, sorrow and hope, loss and continued commitment to the mission that had defined his adolescence. The psychological counseling that Tim received during this transitional period was essential for helping him process the complex emotions surrounding his multiple losses while also developing coping mechanisms that would allow him to continue his heroic activities without being overwhelmed by survivor guilt or paralyzed by fear of additional tragedies. The professional support he received was supplemented by understanding from fellow heroes who had faced similar challenges and learned to carry forward despite heartbreak and disappointment. The maturation that resulted from Tim's confrontation with genuine tragedy transformed him from a promising young hero into someone whose understanding of sacrifice and commitment was based on personal experience rather than theoretical knowledge or second-hand observation. The innocence that had once characterized his approach to heroism was replaced by hard-won wisdom that enhanced his effectiveness while also preparing him for the greater responsibilities and more complex challenges that lay ahead. The relationships within the Batman family that were affected by Tim's period of mourning and recovery required careful navigation, as each member processed the losses differently, while also struggling to maintain the cohesion and mutual support that made their collective mission possible. Bruce Wayne's own guilt over his inability to protect him from tragedy was balanced by pride in the young man's resilience and continued commitment to their shared values. Alfred's role as emotional anchor and practical support during this difficult period demonstrated once again why his presence was essential to the Wayne family's ability to function despite the constant exposure to danger and loss that characterized their chosen mission. The butler's decades of experience with grief and recovery provided him with insights and techniques that proved invaluable in helping Tim navigate the transition from victim to survivor to stronger hero. The training modifications that accompanied Tim's emotional recovery were designed to address both his enhanced capabilities and his evolved understanding of the stakes involved in heroic activities, incorporating lessons learned through painful experience while also preparing him for leadership roles that would require him to guide others through similar challenges and transitions. The boy who had once been protected by others was now being prepared to serve as protector and mentor in his own right. The academic and civilian obligations that Tim continued to maintain despite his personal losses provided necessary structure and normalcy that balanced the intensity of his heroic activities, while also ensuring that his development as a complete person was not entirely subordinated to his crime-fighting commitments. The scholarships and recognition he received for academic achievement demonstrated that excellence was possible even in the midst of profound personal struggle. The emergence from this period of tragedy and transformation marked Tim's completion of the transition from promise to fulfillment, from potential to achievement, from student to master of skills and wisdom that had been purchased through suffering, but would be employed in service of preventing others from experiencing similar losses. The young man who had once observed Batman from a distance was now prepared to stand beside him as an equal partner whose contributions were essential rather than merely helpful. The lessons learned during this crucible of loss would influence every aspect of Tim's subsequent heroic career, providing him with understanding of human fragility and strength that informed his tactical decisions, relationship choices, and leadership style, while also deepening his appreciation for the preciousness of life and the importance of protecting not only strangers, but also those whose love and friendship made heroism meaningful rather than merely dutiful. The apparent death of Bruce Wayne in the cosmic maelstrom that consumed Darkseid and threatened the stability of reality itself sent shockwaves through the superhero community that reverberated far beyond the immediate circle of allies and partners who had worked alongside Batman throughout his legendary career. Yet for Tim Drake, the loss represented not merely the end of a mentor's life, but the shattering of fundamental assumptions about permanence and continuity that had provided stability and meaning throughout his development, from curious observer to accomplished hero. The circumstances surrounding Bruce's disappearance defied conventional understanding of death and survival, as the final battle between Batman and the Lord of Apocalypse had occurred under conditions that transcended normal physical laws and operated according to principles that challenged basic assumptions about the nature of existence and consciousness. The absence of a body, the contradictory evidence about what had actually occurred during those final moments, and the persistent sense among those who knew Bruce best that his story was not yet complete, created uncertainty that was both torturous and hopeful. Dick Grayson's assumption of the Batman mantle represented a logical and necessary response to the immediate crisis created by Bruce's absence, yet his decision to dismiss Tim from the Robin role reflected not disrespect for the younger hero's capabilities, but rather recognition that their relationship had evolved beyond the traditional mentor-student dynamic into something approaching partnership between equals. The original Robin's reluctance to maintain Tim in a subordinate position demonstrated both personal affection and professional assessment of abilities that had grown too sophisticated for conventional sidekick duties. The selection of Damian Wayne as the new Robin was influenced by factors that extended beyond simple capability assessment to encompass Bruce's wishes regarding his biological son's development and the practical necessities of managing a child whose training and psychological conditioning had been shaped by the League of Assassins rather than the moral framework that had guided previous holders of the title. The decision created tensions within the Batman family that reflected competing loyalties and different philosophical approaches to crime fighting and character development. Tim's reaction to being replaced as Robin was complicated by his intellectual understanding of the reasoning behind Dick's decision and his emotional attachment to an identity that had defined his adolescence and shaped his understanding of his own purpose and worth. The costume and title that had once represented the fulfillment of childhood dreams were being transferred to someone whose qualifications were based on bloodline rather than earned achievement, creating resentment that was both justified and ultimately destructive to his psychological well-being. The certainty that Bruce Wayne was still alive, despite all evidence to the contrary, and the acceptance of his death by virtually everyone who had known him, reflected Tim's superior analytical abilities and his refusal to accept conclusions that contradicted patterns and probabilities that he had studied for years. The conviction that Batman could not simply die in conventional fashion was based not on wishful thinking, but on careful analysis of past incidents and understanding of Bruce's resourcefulness and preparation for seemingly impossible scenarios. The decision to adopt the Red Robin identity represented Tim's rejection of both Dick's attempt to redefine his role and the broader assumption that Bruce's death should be accepted without further investigation. The new costume and name symbolized independence from traditional Batman family hierarchy, while also honoring connections to other heroic legacies that had influenced his development and provided models for operating outside conventional support structures. The investigation that Tim launched into Bruce's fate was comprehensive and methodical, drawing upon every resource and technique he had mastered during years of training and practical experience, while also pushing the boundaries of his capabilities in areas that had never been tested under such emotionally charged circumstances. The search for evidence of Bruce's survival became an obsession that consumed his time, energy, and emotional resources, while also isolating him from potential allies who viewed his quest as denial rather than legitimate investigation. The global scope of Tim's investigation required him to develop new skills and establish contacts in regions and communities where his previous experience and reputation provided little advantage, forcing him to rely on intelligence, adaptability, and determination rather than established relationships or institutional support. The journey that took him across continents and through dimensions challenged every aspect of his training, while also providing opportunities for growth that would have been impossible within the confines of traditional partnerships. The technological innovations that Tim developed during his search for Bruce pushed the boundaries of available science and engineering, incorporating principles and materials that he had encountered through his connections to advanced civilizations and futuristic technologies. The equipment that supported his investigation represented cutting-edge achievement that rivaled anything developed by the world's most sophisticated research institutions, while being designed and built by someone who was still, technically, a teenager. The allies that Tim recruited for his mission included individuals whose own motivations and capabilities complemented his needs, while also providing perspectives and resources that would have been impossible to obtain through conventional channels. The partnerships he formed during this period were based on mutual benefit rather than emotional connection, reflecting his evolution from team player to independent operator whose primary loyalty was to the mission rather than personal relationships. The enemies that Tim encountered during his investigation were drawn from the highest levels of criminal organizations and cosmic threats, beings whose interest in preventing Bruce Wayne's return reflected understanding of his significance in maintaining stability and order throughout multiple dimensions and realities. The opposition that his activities generated confirmed that his quest was not merely personal, but had implications that extended far beyond individual relationships or family obligations. The evidence that Tim gradually accumulated during months of intensive investigation painted a complex picture of Bruce's fate that validated his refusal to accept simple explanations, while also revealing the scope of forces that had been involved in his disappearance. The trail that led through time and space, past and future, reality and possibility, demonstrated that Batman's final battle had indeed transcended normal limitations and created consequences that would influence events across multiple timelines and dimensions. The psychological toll of conducting such an extensive investigation while maintaining his other heroic obligations and civilian responsibilities tested Tim's mental and emotional resilience in ways that his previous training had not fully prepared him to handle. The isolation that came from pursuing theories that others considered impossible or delusional created stress that was compounded by grief, guilt, and the constant pressure of operating without adequate support or backup. The breakthrough discoveries that eventually confirmed Bruce's survival came not through conventional detective work, but through analysis of cosmic forces and temporal anomalies that required integration of scientific knowledge, mystical understanding, and intuitive leaps that pushed Tim's capabilities to their absolute limits. The proof that Batman was indeed alive, but trapped in circumstances that prevented his return to the present timeline validated years of investigation, while also revealing the complexity of the challenges that would be required for his rescue. The coalition that Tim assembled for the rescue mission included heroes, villains, and cosmic entities whose cooperation would have been impossible under normal circumstances, but who recognized that Bruce Wayne's continued absence represented a threat to universal stability that transcended traditional allegiances and conflicts. The diplomatic and tactical skills required to coordinate such a diverse group of participants demonstrated Tim's evolution from individual investigator to leader, capable of managing complex operations involving multiple dimensions and competing interests. The technological and mystical components of the rescue operation incorporated elements from every branch of knowledge that Tim had mastered during his heroic career, combining cutting-edge science with ancient magic alien technology with human innovation, theoretical possibility with practical necessity. The complexity of the undertaking exceeded anything that had been attempted in recorded history, while also serving as the culmination of everything Tim had learned about problem solving, resource management, and strategic thinking. The success of the mission to retrieve Bruce Wayne from his temporal prison represented not only personal victory for Tim, but also confirmation of his transformation from student to master, from follower to leader, from Robin to independent hero whose capabilities and judgment were recognized by beings whose power and experience far exceeded those of most conventional heroes. The boy who had once watched Batman from a distance had become someone capable of rescuing his mentor from impossible circumstances. The reunion between Tim and Bruce was complicated by the changes that both had undergone during their separation, as the young man who had launched a desperate search had evolved into someone whose independence and capabilities no longer required traditional mentorship, while the returning hero had experienced trials and challenges that had modified his own understanding of heroism and relationships. The partnership that had once been defined by student-teacher dynamics now required renegotiation based on mutual respect between equals. The recognition within the superhero community of Tim's achievement in successfully retrieving Bruce Wayne established his reputation as someone whose capabilities transcended any single identity or costume, proving that his worth as a hero was based not on institutional support, but on personal qualities and achievements that would be valuable regardless of official titles or organizational affiliations. The quest that had begun as personal mission had become legendary accomplishment that influenced how other heroes understood the possibilities and limitations of determination, combined with exceptional ability. The aftermath of Bruce's return created new dynamics within the Batman family that reflected the growth and change that had occurred during his absence, while also requiring adjustment to circumstances that no longer matched previous patterns and expectations. Tim's role as Red Robin was now established as legitimate and necessary, rather than rebellious or temporary, while his relationship with Bruce was based on partnership rather than mentorship. The lessons learned during the period of investigation and rescue would influence Tim's approach to heroism for the remainder of his career, providing him with understanding of cosmic forces and temporal mechanics that few heroes possessed, while also demonstrating that seemingly impossible challenges could be overcome through persistence, intelligence, and willingness to think beyond conventional limitations. The young man who had once been dismissed as simply Batman's latest sidekick had proven himself capable of achieving what others had considered impossible, establishing a legacy that would inspire future generations of heroes, while also serving as foundation for his own continued growth and development. The successful retrieval of Bruce Wayne from the temporal prison that had held him captive across multiple timelines established Tim Drake's reputation as a detective and strategist whose capabilities transcended conventional limitations. Yet the victory also marked the beginning of a new phase in his heroic career that would test his ability to maintain his identity and independence, while operating within the complex web of relationships and obligations that defined the extended Batman family in an era of unprecedented global threats and cosmic challenges. The Red Robin identity that Tim had adopted during his quest to prove Bruce's survival evolved from temporary necessity into permanent persona that reflected his maturation beyond the traditional constraints of sidekick roles and junior partnerships, embodying principles and methods that honored his training under Batman, while also incorporating innovations and perspectives that he had developed through years of independent operation and leadership experience that few heroes of any age had been privileged to acquire. The costume that accompanied Tim's establishment as Red Robin represented more than mere aesthetic choice or symbolic gesture, incorporating advanced materials and technologies that he had acquired during his global investigation, while also serving as visible manifestation of his evolution from student to teacher, from follower to leader, from local hero to international operative, whose responsibilities and capabilities extended far beyond the boundaries of any single city or region. The base of operations that Tim established for his Red Robin activities reflected both his enhanced resources and his expanded operational scope, incorporating facilities for research, training, communication, and coordination that rivaled anything maintained by government agencies or corporate entities, while also providing the flexibility and security necessary for someone whose missions might take him anywhere in the world at any time, and under any circumstances that duty or necessity might require. The investigation techniques that Tim had developed during his search for Bruce Wayne proved equally valuable when applied to conventional criminal enterprises and emerging threats that traditional law enforcement agencies were unprepared to address effectively. Combining cutting-edge technology with innovative analytical methods that could identify patterns and connections invisible to observers who lacked his unique combination of training, experience, and intellectual capabilities. The international network of contacts and allies that Tim had cultivated during his global search provided him with resources and intelligence that made him uniquely effective at addressing threats that crossed national boundaries or operated according to principles that transcended local jurisdictions and conventional legal frameworks. While his reputation for reliability and competence earned him cooperation from individuals and organizations that might have been reluctant to work with less proven heroes, the technological innovations that Tim continued to develop during his tenure as Red Robin pushed the boundaries of available science while also incorporating principles derived from alien civilizations, future timelines, and mystical traditions that he had encountered during his various adventures and investigations, creating tools and techniques that enhanced his effectiveness while also contributing to the broader heroic community's ability to address increasingly sophisticated threats. The leadership roles that Tim increasingly assumed within team operations and interagency collaborations reflected recognition of his strategic thinking and coordination capabilities by heroes whose experience and reputation far exceeded his own, yet who acknowledged that his analytical skills and comprehensive understanding of complex operational requirements made him uniquely qualified to manage missions that involved multiple participants with diverse abilities and conflicting priorities. The Teen Titans that operated under Tim's leadership during this period represented the culmination of his evolution from team member to mentor, as the responsibilities of guiding younger heroes through their own development required him to integrate everything he had learned about heroism, teamwork, and character formation into comprehensive programs that prepared new generations of heroes for challenges that would test not only their abilities but also their commitment to the values that separated protectors from predators. The training programs that Tim developed for his Teen Titans teammates drew upon his extensive experience with different mentoring styles and educational approaches, incorporating elements from Bruce Wayne's systematic methodology, Dick Grayson's inspirational leadership, and his own analytical approach to problem solving, while also adapting to the unique needs and characteristics of each individual team member, whose development required personalized attention and specialized guidance. The missions that the Teen Titans undertook under Tim's leadership addressed threats that ranged from street-level crime to cosmic catastrophes, providing team members with comprehensive experience, while also serving the broader heroic community's needs for rapid response and specialized capabilities that larger organizations might find difficult to deploy quickly. efficiently in crisis situations that required immediate action and flexible thinking. The relationships within the team that Tim fostered emphasized mutual respect and shared responsibility rather than traditional hierarchical structures, reflecting his understanding that true leadership was based on inspiration and example rather than authority and control, while his own willingness to accept criticism and modify his approaches demonstrated the humility and adaptability that characterized the most effective heroes regardless of their individual capabilities or achievements. The global threats that increasingly demanded Tim's attention during this period reflected the evolution of criminal enterprises and hostile organizations that had adapted to the presence of superhuman protectors by developing more sophisticated methods and international scope that required coordinated responses from heroes who possessed both tactical expertise and cultural understanding necessary for effective operation in diverse environments and political contexts. The technological terrorism that emerged as a primary concern during Tim's Red Robin era represented a new category of threat that combined conventional criminal motivations with advanced capabilities that could cause widespread devastation through manipulation of infrastructure systems and communication networks that modern civilization depended upon for basic survival and economic stability, requiring countermeasures that were both technically sophisticated and strategically comprehensive. The cyber warfare operations that Tim conducted against these technological threats demonstrated his mastery of computer systems and network security that exceeded the capabilities of most government agencies and corporate security departments, while his ability to anticipate and counter enemy strategies reflected understanding of both technical vulnerabilities and human psychology that made him uniquely effective at protecting civilian populations from attacks that others might not even recognize until damage had already been inflicted. The international law enforcement cooperation that Tim facilitated during his various investigations required diplomatic skills and cultural sensitivity that complemented his technical expertise, while also building relationships that would prove valuable for future operations and intelligence gathering, as his reputation for competence and integrity earned him trust from officials who might have been skeptical of superhero involvement in matters they considered within their professional jurisdiction. The mentoring relationships that Tim developed with younger heroes extended beyond his official role with the Teen Titans to encompass informal guidance and support for individuals who sought his advice or assistance with problems that their own mentors might not be equipped to address, reflecting his growing recognition as someone whose experience and judgment were valuable resources for the broader heroic community rather than merely his immediate teammates and partners. The academic research that Tim continued to pursue during his heroic activities reflected his commitment to intellectual development and his understanding that effective crime fighting required comprehensive knowledge of subjects that ranged from forensic science to international politics, while his contributions to various fields through publications and consultations demonstrated that his analytical capabilities could benefit society through conventional channels as well as heroic activities. The corporate consulting work that Tim occasionally undertook provided him with insights into business practices and organizational structures that enhanced his understanding of how criminal enterprises operated, while also generating resources that supported his heroic activities and allowed him to maintain independence from traditional funding sources that might have compromised his operational flexibility or ethical autonomy. The psychological counseling and support services that Tim provided to other heroes reflected his recognition that the emotional toll of heroic activities could be as damaging as physical injuries if not properly addressed, while his own experience with tragedy and loss had taught him techniques and perspectives that could help others navigate similar challenges without abandoning their commitment to protecting innocent life and serving the greater good. The strategic planning and threat assessment work that Tim conducted for various heroic organizations and government agencies demonstrated his evolution into someone whose value extended far beyond individual combat effectiveness to encompass systematic thinking about long-term challenges and comprehensive approaches to problems that required coordination among multiple agencies and individuals with different capabilities and priorities. The legacy projects that Tim initiated during this period were designed to ensure that the knowledge and techniques he had developed would continue to benefit future generations of heroes, even if he was unable to continue his active career, reflecting his understanding that true heroism was measured not only by immediate achievements, but also by contributions to the ongoing mission that transcended individual lifespans and personal limitations. The philosophical framework that guided Tim's activities as Red Robin represented synthesis of everything he had learned about heroism, justice, and moral responsibility during his journey from curious observer to accomplished leader, incorporating insights from mentors, teammates, allies, and enemies, while also reflecting his own unique perspective on the challenges and opportunities that defined heroic service in an increasingly complex and interconnected world. The international recognition that Tim received for his achievements as Red Robin established him as one of the most respected heroes of his generation, while also demonstrating that effective heroism was not dependent upon supernatural powers or advanced technology, but could be achieved through dedication, intelligence, and unwavering commitment to principles that elevated the welfare of others above personal comfort or conventional success. The transition from the Red Robin identity to new challenges and responsibilities would eventually require Tim to evolve once again, yet the foundation that he had built during this crucial period of his development would continue to influence his approach to heroism and his understanding of his role in the ongoing struggle between forces that sought to create and those that were driven to destroy everything that gave existence, meaning, and hope. The culmination of Tim Drake's heroic journey would manifest itself through opportunities and challenges that tested every aspect of his development, while also demonstrating the breadth of his capabilities and the depth of his commitment to the principles that had guided his evolution from curious observer to one of the most accomplished heroes of his generation. Yet none of these trials would prove more significant than his brief but memorable tenure as the heir to the Batman Beyond legacy, when circumstances demanded that he step forward to fill a void that threatened the future itself. The disappearance of Terry McGinnis from the timeline that would become Neo-Gotham created ripple effects that extended far beyond the immediate concerns of a single city or era. As the absence of the future, Batman threatened to unravel decades of progress and protection that had been built upon the foundation of his heroic service, requiring intervention from someone who possessed both the skills necessary to operate the advanced Batman suit and the moral character required to wield such power responsibly in service of others rather than personal advancement. Tim's selection for this unprecedented responsibility reflected not only his exceptional qualifications and comprehensive training, but also the recognition by those who understood temporal mechanics and cosmic forces that his unique combination of analytical brilliance, moral clarity, and heroic experience made him the only candidate capable of maintaining the integrity of future timeline, while also preserving the values and methods that had made the Batman legend a force for justice across multiple centuries and realities. The advanced technology that comprised the Batman Beyond suit represented the culmination of scientific achievement and engineering innovation that exceeded anything Tim had previously encountered. incorporating materials and energy sources that operated according to principles that pushed the boundaries of conventional physics, while also requiring mental discipline and physical conditioning that tested the limits of human capability and endurance, demanding mastery that few individuals could achieve, regardless of their training or dedication. The Neo-Gotham that Tim protected during his tenure as Batman Beyond was simultaneously familiar and alien, incorporating elements that reminded him of the city he had known, while also presenting challenges and opportunities that reflected decades of social evolution, technological advancement, and cultural change that required adaptation and flexibility from someone whose experience had been shaped by very different circumstances and expectations. The criminals and threats that operated in this future timeline possessed capabilities and resources that made them formidable opponents, even for someone equipped with the most advanced protective technology available. Yet Tim's analytical approach to problem-solving and his comprehensive understanding of criminal psychology provided him with advantages that complemented the suit's technical superiority, while also demonstrating that wisdom and experience could triumph over raw power. When properly applied, the responsibility of protecting not only present-day civilians, but also the integrity of future history created unprecedented pressure and complexity that tested Tim's decision-making abilities in ways that his previous heroic activities had not fully prepared him to handle, as every action carried implications that extended far beyond immediate consequences to influence the development of entire civilizations and the fate of countless individuals who had not yet been born. The success of Tim's performance as Batman Beyond validated years of training and character development, while also demonstrating that his evolution from Robin to Red Robin to independent hero had prepared him for challenges that exceeded anything envisioned by those who had initially guided his development, proving that true heroism was based not on specific identities or costumes, but on internal qualities that could adapt to any circumstances or requirements. The return to his own timeline following the successful restoration of Terry McGinnis to his proper place in history provided Tim with perspective on his own achievements and capabilities that confirmed his growth into someone whose value to the heroic community extended far beyond any single role or partnership, while also preparing him for the multiple occasions when he would be called upon to assume the mantle of Batman himself during Bruce Wayne's various absences or incapacities. The temporary tenures as Batman that punctuated Tim's ongoing career demonstrated his mastery of every aspect of the heroic mission, while the return to his own timeline following the successful restoration of Terry McGinnis to his proper place in history provided Tim with perspective on his own achievements and capabilities that confirmed his growth into someone whose value to the heroic community extended far beyond any single role or partnership, while also preparing him for the multiple occasions when he would be called upon to assume the mantle of Batman himself during Bruce Wayne's various absences or incapacities. The temporary tenures as Batman that punctuated Tim's ongoing career demonstrated his mastery of every aspect of the heroic mission, while also revealing the unique perspective and approach that he brought to the role, incorporating elements of his detective training, strategic thinking, and collaborative leadership style that complemented, rather than simply imitated, the methods that had made Bruce Wayne legendary throughout the world. The recognition from Bruce himself that Tim possessed the potential to surpass even his own achievements as both detective and protector represented validation from the one person whose opinion carried ultimate authority on matters related to the Batman legacy, while also acknowledging that the student had indeed grown beyond the need for traditional mentorship into someone whose contributions to their shared mission were essential rather than merely helpful. The evolution of Tim's costume and identity during the later stages of his career reflected both practical considerations and symbolic significance, as the transition from Red Robin to the Drake identity represented his movement beyond traditional superhero archetypes into something more flexible and adaptable that could serve multiple functions while maintaining the leadership roles that Tim increasingly assumed within the broader heroic community reflected recognition of his unique combination of tactical brilliance, moral authority, and practical experience that made him invaluable for coordinating complex operations and managing diverse teams whose success depended upon integration of different capabilities and perspectives under unified command that could inspire confidence and maintain focus during crisis situations. The mentoring relationships that defined much of Tim's later career provided opportunities for him to give back to the community that had nurtured his development, while also ensuring that future generations of heroes would benefit from the knowledge and wisdom that he had accumulated through years of service, sacrifice, and dedication to ideals that transcended personal comfort or conventional definitions of success. The technological innovations that Tim continued to develop throughout his career contributed not only to his own effectiveness but also to the advancement of heroic capabilities generally, as his research and development work produced tools and techniques that enhanced the ability of heroes at every level to protect innocent life and serve the cause of justice in an increasingly complex and dangerous world. The international recognition that Tim received for his contributions to global security and humanitarian causes demonstrated that his impact extended far beyond the boundaries of traditional superhero activities to encompass diplomatic initiatives, scientific research, and social programs that addressed root causes of conflict and suffering, rather than merely responding to their symptoms after damage had already been inflicted. The academic achievements that Tim maintained throughout his heroic career, including advanced degrees in multiple fields and recognition as a leading expert in several areas of scientific research, proved that intellectual excellence and heroic service were not incompatible, but rather reinforced each other in ways that enhanced both individual effectiveness and societal benefit through the application of rigorous thinking to practical problems. The business ventures and philanthropic activities that Tim pursued during his civilian identity provided him with resources and influence that complemented his heroic activities, while also creating positive change through conventional channels that reached populations and addressed issues that might not have been accessible through traditional superhero methods, demonstrating that true service required multiple approaches and sustained commitment across all aspects of life. The relationships within the extended Robin legacy that Tim fostered with Dick Grayson, Jason Todd, and Damian Wayne created a network of mutual support and shared commitment that strengthened all participants, while also ensuring continuity of values and methods across generational transitions that might otherwise have resulted in fragmentation or loss of institutional knowledge and wisdom. The recognition from Dick Grayson himself that Tim had indeed become not only the best Robin, but someone who would likely surpass even Bruce Wayne as Batman represented acknowledgement from the original Boy Wonder, whose own legendary achievements provided the standard against which all subsequent holders of the title were measured, validating years of dedicated service and character development that had transformed a curious child into one of the most accomplished heroes in history. Bruce Wayne's prediction that Tim would someday become the world's greatest detective represented not merely personal pride in a protege's achievements, but professional assessment based on observed capabilities and demonstrated results that exceeded established benchmarks for investigative excellence, confirming that the boy who had once deduced the secret identities of Batman and Robin had indeed fulfilled his extraordinary potential. The legacy that Tim Drake established through his various identities and achievements would continue to influence heroic service long after his active career had ended, providing inspiration and practical guidance for future generations, while also serving as proof that heroism was not dependent upon tragic origins or supernatural gifts, but could be achieved through dedication, intelligence, and unwavering commitment to serving something greater than oneself. The unique position that Tim occupies within superhero mythology as the Robin who chose heroism rather than inheriting it through tragedy demonstrates that conscious decision and moral commitment are more powerful foundations for heroic service than circumstance or accident, while his continued evolution and adaptation prove that true heroes never stop growing, learning, and finding new ways to serve the cause of justice and protection of innocent life. The complete story of Tim Drake thus represents not merely the chronicle of one individual's journey from observer to participant, but rather a demonstration of the principles and possibilities that define heroism at its finest, showing that extraordinary achievement is possible for anyone who possesses the courage to choose service over comfort, dedication over convenience, and hope over despair in the face of challenges that would deter those with less commitment to ideals that elevate consciousness above mere survival and transform existence into something worthy of preservation and protection. And so we reach the end of our journey through the extraordinary life of Timothy Drake, the boy who became Robin not through loss but through choice, not through vengeance but through love. In his story, we find the purest expression of what it means to be a hero by decision rather than circumstance, to choose hope over despair, logic over emotion, and service over self. Tim Drake stands as proof that the greatest detectives are made not just through tragedy, but through the careful observation of the world's pain and the conscious decision to heal it. His legacy reminds us that sometimes the most profound heroism comes not from those who have nothing left to lose, but from those who have everything to gain by walking away, yet choose to stay and fight for others. Rest now, guardian of tomorrow's mysteries, and may your dreams be filled with the quiet satisfaction that comes from knowing that in a world of darkness, there will always be those who choose to light a candle rather than curse the shadows that surround us.